Seems like a lot of my reading this year has had to do with books about mothers, so I thought I'd make a list of Bad A Fictional Mothers. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to another video in which I have a list of books related to a topic. In this case, it's about motherhood, and really, I think in lots of aspects here, which is a topic which I mentioned before, kind of came to interest me because I was reading a lot of books about motherhood. It may also have something to do with the fact that my daughter had her first grandchild this year, and so I've been thinking more about motherhood probably as a result of that. So I've kind of divided my list of 10 Bad A mothers into groups, and the first group would be, not so great mothers. So these are 3 books in which the mother character dominates the book, but is not necessarily great. This is Jane Austen July. I'm not reading anything by Jane Austen or necessarily about Jane Austen, but she wrote one of the great books about a terrible mother, and that's Lady Susan. Lady Susan is conniving, she's devious, she is of questionable moral, she is looking to marry her daughter off regardless of who her daughter wanted to marry to for her own benefit. She engages in, let's just say, at the very least, some flirtations to advance herself, and she is just a delightfully kind of wicked character, and I think really one of the great creations of Jane Austen's career, but not a particularly good mother, but kind of a bad egg in other ways. The next book on my list is Beloved by Toni Morrison, in which the main character, Setha, is a bad mother because she does the thing probably that makes you the worst mother possible, and if you haven't read the book, I won't give it away. She does it for a very specific reason, and a reason that, we as readers of the book understand. Setha has escaped from slavery. She's gotten her family out of slavery, and she essentially refuses to go back or let her kids go back. Her action comes back to haunt her quite literally, in lots of ways, destroys the life she has been attempting to make, alienates her surviving children, it creates all kinds of problems for her, but just kind of creates this, I think, really great book that exists both on the metaphorical level and on the realistic level, centered around a real event from history. I'm trying not to give too much away in my reviews because I've had some complaints about spoilers, so if you haven't read it, you should. Beloved is the greatest American novel in my own personal opinion. And then the third book on my list here of Bad A mothers who are not necessarily good mothers is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinero. Pinero was primarily a mystery writer, and Elena Knows is structured like a mystery. Our main character, Elena's daughter, has been found hanging in a church. The police quickly decide that it was suicide. Elena knows it's not, and she sets about to investigate this, what she believes is a crime, not committed by her daughter and not suicide. This is really difficult for her because she has really advanced, painful, debilitating, crippling Parkinson's, which makes it almost impossible for her to move. And really the greatness of the book is in the descriptions of all the things she has to go through to move, and all the ways in which she needs help, and all the things she has to think just to get herself in motion, and how carefully she has to plan to go about all these things. As it turns out, I think we find out that Elena was not always the great mother, and that perhaps she and her daughter didn't quite have the relationship she thought they had. My next 2 mothers come under the heading of Your Mother Had a Life Before You Were Born mothers. These are mothers who, as kids, realized that their moms were not just their moms. Their moms had identities before. The most obvious book here is a book that I listened to as an audiobook that I got from my library, and that was Tom Lake. I primarily listened to it because Meryl Streep read the audiobook, and this is a book about a mother who is recounting to her 3 grown daughters her period as an actress. And during that period as an actress, she met and had an affair with, had a relationship with a man who turned out to be an incredibly famous star, and kind of all the aspects of this. And one of the things I think is great is how the story reveals, in the book, the mother reveals things to her daughters that come as a surprise, as a shock that they didn't know, and kind of revealing herself to be a person they weren't quite aware of. At the same time, she also holds things back. I thought it was really a charming book, and an example of a Bad A mother. Then also Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree. This won the International Booker Award a couple of years back, and I read it, and I reviewed it and said that I didn't necessarily enjoy reading it, but it's a book that I greatly appreciated. And that's true. The book has a lot of really vivid imagery and description, and its main character, whose name I've forgotten, is a widow. Her husband has died at the beginning of the book, and her grown children are then interacting with her. And they each have an image of her in which they placed her, and that's something they need her to be. But when her husband dies, she feels somewhat liberated from those ideas. She moves out of the house with her oldest son, moves into the home or the apartment of her daughter, who is an independent writer, journalist of some kind, and kind of throws her world upside down. She has friends and makes friends with people who her kids don't know and don't necessarily approve of. They all kind of want to, in some way, force her back into whatever box that she's been in, and she essentially, instead of doing that, kind of goes on a quest, an actually physically dangerous quest, to kind of reunite with her past before the Indian partition. And she's a great and memorable character, and there's so many memorable scenes and ideas from that. And I like the idea of this kind of older woman who's a mother, and again, who is not just a caricature of motherhood or of an old lady. She refuses to be just that stereotype. And she has things she wants to do and things she wants to accomplish, and people she wants to reconnect with, and she refuses to let her children kind of keep her in the box in which she'd been in until her husband died. The next group of books all feature mothers who I think are just kind of really sort of tough mothers. That's how I would put it. The next two books, the first is Milkman by Anna Burns. This book won the Booker Prize many years ago now. It really is one of the great books I've read since I was on BookTube. It is set in Ireland during the time of the Troubles in the 1970s, and our main character is a young woman who essentially refuses to, as far as possible, acknowledge all the things that go on around her. And part of the way she does this is that she reads while she walks. So literally while she walks through Belfast streets where there have been bombings and killings, she's reading a book and not paying attention. This drives her mother crazy because her mother is, of course, worried about her, and she's able to kind of live in this bubble in which she doesn't allow the things going on around her to intrude on her life until a man who's known as Milkman, who is apparently higher up in part of the, I'm going to say the IRA organization, who is known to be a very dangerous man and a killer, takes a sexual or romantic interest in her. This puts her in danger. This forces her to kind of confront the reality of the situation in which she lives. And despite, all the kind of teenage and young woman problems she has with her mother, what we find out is that it is her mother who steps in, does the things necessary to protect her, to prevent worse things from happening to her. And it's her mother and group of mothers in Northern Ireland who are kind of behind the scenes doing what they can and exerting some power over these various organizations that are engaged in violence against one another sometimes and against Protestants in the Belfast area. The next book on my list, or the next mother I have like this on the list, are the various mothers in Jesmyn Ward's latest novel, Let Us Descend. The main character in this book is a young woman named Annis, and Annis is the daughter of an enslaved woman, her mother, and her owner. This creates a situation in which Annis's mother tries to protect her. This results in something bad happening to her. Annis then becomes, kind of takes over that role and is trying to protect other enslaved women on this plantation, and she ends up being sold away as well. Her mother had taken a lot of time in her youth to kind of teach her about the history of her people, primarily her grandmother. And her grandmother, or her great-grandmother, maybe, before she was kidnapped in Africa and brought to the United States and enslaved, and teaches her kind of self-defense and fighting skills and all kinds of things that, she might need to know, knowledge from, their African past, perhaps, so that when Annis is sold away and she is put essentially with a slave trader, it's part of the internal slave trade, and it goes through these kind of nightmarish experiences, some of the worst experiences possible for enslaved people. It is to the spirit of her grandmother and her mother that she's continually looking, and for that knowledge and to remember that. And in the end, there's kind of, while we don't see, what I think we would call a victory, we do see Anna's kind of reclaiming her personhood and carrying these traditions forward. And there is this kind of, not necessarily a satisfying win, but this idea that she's going to step out and do things on her own, and that involves motherhood as well. So the next 3 books on my list are all involve mothers who aren't mothers. So the first book of those I have here is Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, in which the great aunt takes over the role of grandmother and mother to try to heal and keep her family together after tragic events, the tragic events which are part of there take place, and she then becomes part of this tradition of Native American women, indigenous women who play these roles of trying to hold things together, trying to keep families together, trying to keep history alive, trying to keep tradition alive, and trying to keep mainly her 3 nephews safe, with varying levels of success. And she really is the character who battles to make all that happen. She's the character in whose home everyone lives, and she's the one who feeds them, and it's her job that she works relentlessly and takes on extra shifts that provide them with an economic foundation. And she's the one when she gets sick who her health and her health problems threaten to throw the family into even more disarray than they're in. And she's just a remarkable character and a really powerful one there. Along those same lines is the main character from Susie Boyt's novel Loved and Missed. I read this because of the BookTube prize this year. Otherwise, I probably never would have seen it. It's a really good book. I didn't put it in my top 3 for various reasons. It's a really good book in which a grandmother takes over the responsibility for raising her granddaughter because her daughter is a drug addict, and that she slowly finds a way to bring the granddaughter into her home and to raise the granddaughter in a more stable situation that is threatened by her own health problems. And we see this young girl growing up with her grandmother, trying to have a relationship with her mother, and in the end we see that all of that effort, I think, that this grandmother has put into being a mother to her granddaughter pays off in ways that are unexpected and really powerfully moving. And the last book I have is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy, which I think was my pick to win the Women's Prize. I just think it's a really remarkable look at the struggles that young mothers go through, I think it's a remarkable portrait of a young mother doing her best against a lot of daunting obstacles. In this book, the mother, who refers to herself as a soldier, I believe, refers to herself as soldier in the book, and her child is known as, she thinks her child is sailor. Soldier faces all the problems. She has a toddler age child who doesn't sleep, who has problems eating. This child kind of dominates her life. It takes away her individuality. She only becomes kind of a mother. She doesn't seem to have friends outside of mothers. Her husband is far less helpful than she needs him to be, and seems to be completely unaware. Society, she feels like, is judging her all the time for all the decisions she makes and all the mistakes she makes. She feels she's under this kind of constant scrutiny. And I think it really is one of the most vivid, real kind of portraits of motherhood and this kind of postpartum period, in this case a little bit longer after that. And I just thought it was incredibly effective, and she emerges to me as really kind of a hero mother, as all but perhaps 2 of these women on my list are. Anyway, there you go. There is my list of 10 Bad A Fictional Mothers. If you've read any of these books, have any thoughts about these mothers or any other books about mothers or motherhood, please leave them in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.